So, John, thanks very much for joining us this month in our monthly webinar. For all of you that are not familiar, John Cammalleri has been with HP for the last 10 years as the VP of Commercial, basically responsible for the channel in Canada. John's past includes 3 years at Oracle, managing partners and alliances, a year at Samsung, 9 years at HP, and then prior to that, John was at Synnex, what's known as Synnex now, but back then was known as Maricel. Obviously a very large organization. I don't know that there's anything that anyone that's more qualified to talk about the opportunities the channel brings as well as the challenges that come with it. So we're thrilled to have you on this call, John, and I kind of like to start off with a softball, one around what are the most common challenges? I mean, we all know what the benefits of the channel are, and speed to market, potentially large sales force, knowledge of and trust of the channel between customers. But what are the kind of the biggest challenges you deal with on a regular basis within the channel?
Well, first of all, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Look, just to kind of give some perspective, our channel is about $2.5 billion in Canadian currency per year. We have 3 broad distributors. We have 3 specialty distributors, and we have about 1,600 different partners being dealers or value-added resellers. So it's a very, very large network of partners. And so there are a lot of challenges. Some very basic, simple challenges. How do you create preference? How do you motivate the channel? How do you cover the channel? How do you manage such a vast partner set that are in some cases, very different from each other? And how do you do that consistently? Those are kind of ongoing challenges. But likely the most difficult challenge for us, we're an established organization that's been selling through the channel for a very long period of time. Over 95% of our revenue goes through the channel. So we're fundamentally a channel company, really. Mm-hmm. So given that we're mature, we've kind of gotten over a whole bunch of challenges over the years, but the one that remains very consistent is conflict. We do have a lot of conflict in the channel. And conflict, as I'll describe it, is we have multiple channel partners, dealers, that want to partner with HP for a single opportunity, largely in the enterprise space or public sector space. And every partner believes they're the ones that you should be partnering with for all of their reasons. So that becomes a big challenge, because as much as this does become a business decision, the channel has an emotional element to it. They'll tend to feel like we left them out of the game, or and so on and so forth. So it is really important to have very good relationships with your channel. But when it comes to opportunity conflict, this is something that really we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I'd say that's probably the most difficult and most consistent challenge we face.
And I imagine that's not one that'll ever go away unless you reduce it down to one partner.
Yeah, and you kind of don't want it to go away, right? I mean, you start to have partners that, if you don't have an objective way of deciding what your partner strategy is going to be, which is, of course, very critical, must be objective and very clear, and you're just choosing partners, then you're going to be left with, you're going to see a major reduction in the number of partners that want to work with you, and that's not good for anybody.
Now, there's a wide variety of companies that are on this particular call. I don't know that there's one. Maybe there might be 1 or 2 that are the size of HP. I imagine their problems are a little different, but I don't know that the conflict goes away. Between startup and mid-size, they may not have the heavy reliance on the channel that you have, but they may have 40, 50, 60% of the revenue based on the channel. And conflict is not only going to be one amongst partners, but it's also going to be one amongst their own direct sales force, right? Which just throws a whole different wrench into the mix. how would now you don't have that problem so much because so much of your revenue is driven through the channel, but in your past I'm sure you've seen where direct sales force conflict with the channel is a pretty big thing. And back when I started in the channel back in, let's call it the 80s, that was probably
Sure.
the biggest conflict that we had was, direct sales force with the indirect sales force.
Yeah, I think these are, I think the best way to deal with that, because it's not always been 95%, right? It's evolved to that as we have, incredible pressure on operating expense and what that all means in an organization. We've moved further and closer and closer to 100% channel. So, but it wasn't always that way.
Right.
I think the critical element in reducing the amount of channel conflict when it comes to direct or indirect is to have a strategy around what the ideal direct customer looks like and what the ideal channel partner looks like. And you are very transparent with the partners within your community. We will take this type of customer direct. No surprises, it's when you can't rationalize those decisions that there really does become a problem. But if it's clearly articulated, known ahead of time, work with partners to define those rules of engagement, if you will. I think that goes a long way. I mean, we see it today. We have competitors in the marketplace, both on the PC side, but predominantly more on both on the PC and the print side, but predominantly more on the print side, where some of the largest, most successful competitors of ours have that dual strategy and have very committed partners. So you just got to be clear and have a strategy around that.
Right. Now, one of the challenges that obviously you're going to have is with all of these partners, getting their alignment on your core business objectives is going to be a challenge, right? Every partner has multiple vendors that they can deal with. Some partners are more tied to you than they are to other vendors, but also some are tied more to other vendors than they are to you. How do you align business goals and objectives to make sure that, since you're so dependent on the channel, that they're pulling in the direction your organization would like them to pull in? How do you impart advice without insulting those partners when it comes down to positioning themselves in the marketplace?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it's a complex problem because in order for you to get alignment, first and foremost, that partner needs to really understand where the market is heading and what some of the macro and micro factors going into the marketplace. So for example, we do a lot of research on market dynamics. What's the effect of digital transformation? How many companies are there? What's top of mind for CEOs? What's top of mind for CFOs? What's top of mind for CIOs? And for chief security officers. And so, we really make a really big effort to understand what's at play, what customers are thinking, what's going on in the world. And from there, you develop a strategy on what you're going to bring to market. And the reason that's relevant is because if you're in front of a partner trying to get them to align, they need to believe that you've done your homework. It's consistent with what they're seeing in the market. The value or differentiation you're creating is meaningful and truly different. And so you get this kind of alignment going at an executive level when you're able to demonstrate real market differential that's meaningful to the customer. And I think that's the starting point. But beyond that, even if you get that kind of collaboration and alignment at the executive level, when it comes to execution in the street, there are things you're not going to get alignment on. There just are. Remember, we have traditional systems integrators as a partner. We have value-added resellers. We have online players. We have hybrid players. mean, it's all over the place. So to get alignment perfectly with all the partners, you can imagine 1,600 trying to get alignment with 1,600 partners. It's just not going to happen. So what you do in those cases is you kind of agree on, because you will find alignment, particularly with the ones you're most collaborative with. You will find alignment in certain areas, and you leverage it, and you take advantage of it, and you go there. And the other things you can't go to, because part of the whole channel DNA, if you will, it's not only about what we want as a company. We have to respect what the partners want, what our dealers need, what they want. And so it really works both ways. So there are going to be times where you just kind of back off and move on and find somebody else and leverage those opportunities where you are aligned.
So is that, in a commoditized world, and while of course not everything's a commodity, but it seems to be going that way, where people can do their own research online, where the sales process starts way later than it ever has. Mm-hmm. Is that the value proposition an organization like yours would provide to the channel, that knowledge of where the market's going, helping develop and establish that alignment and that guidance? Is that a large part of the value that you offer? And is that why people work with HP from a partner standpoint? Or is there more to it than that?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Again, we have a mature channel. And so our partners know how to engage, when to engage, and who to engage with. And so what we do not rely on the partners for is HP's brand in the marketplace. We simply can't. Mm-hmm. We have to take responsibility for our own brand. We have to take responsibility to become a digitally transformed company. We can't just say, dealers, you go do that for us. That's just not going to happen. So when you look at things like trying to get end customer preference as opposed to channel preference, those are two very different things, and we need to drive. It's our responsibility to drive that preference with that customer. So when we say things like, for example, we're very dependent on the channel, you can imagine that we can't be so committed to the channel that in these large opportunities, whether it's public sector, the banking industry, any type of financial services, et cetera, healthcare, in these very large opportunities, we cannot rely on the channel to do all of the positioning, all of the work involved with the customer to understand the customer's particular situation and the solution they're looking for. That's incumbent upon us. What we do is go out and do that work and then work with our channel partners to help put them in a position to succeed. That's part of our solution. So we could never just leave it to the channel. We need to take responsibility for all of that, and we do. And there's lots of room for improvement. But at the same time, we also recognize that partners need to get there. So we give them tools to help them get over that bridge to transform digitally, if you will. And we help them get there, but there needs to be a willingness by that partner community. And for the most part, if you look at our subset of partners, the ones that we're kind of mostly aligned with are there. They are already there, and they've been there for a while. So that's kind of how we view that, the importance of, and the roles that the channel play and don't play when it comes to, customer engagement or persuading a customer or branding to a customer.
So let's take a step back. Let's go, imagine that you're at a company. Now, you've worked at a lot of big brands, between HP and Samsung and Oracle. There's a lot of big brands there. So this may be a challenge for you to do, or maybe not. But imagine you're at a company that, may have 100 partners and you don't have a well-known brand. What kind of recommendation would you make to those companies? I have these calls all the time. It always starts with, I need to add more partners, which I find interesting. And my first question to them is always, well, how well are your current partners doing? How are they meeting your expectations? And 99 out of 100 have the same answer. Well, we have, some partners that are doing okay, and then the rest, well, they're doing terribly. And I know every company struggles from this, that long tail, but they don't have a brand, or their brand's not well known enough. If you were in that situation where you were looking to grow the channel, and by grow the channel, I mean grow revenue. I don't mean just add partners. I mean, how would you recommend a company that had 50, 100, 200 partners that's looking to grow? How would you recommend that they go about increasing that revenue, that piece of the pie, when it is so competitive up there, and especially when you don't have a name?
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, there's opportunity in that, right? I mean, if you have a subset of partners that, or if you have a partner community, and your brand is, let's say, underrepresented in market, low market share, not great brand awareness, that actually creates a massive opportunity for a channel partner, because it allows them to differentiate their solution from anyone else, and it allows them to work very intimately with that particular, vendor, software, hardware, doesn't matter, services, etc. So it actually can be a competitive advantage. The challenge is how do you get it to be a competitive advantage, and what are the things that you need to do to get there? And there are many ways of looking at that, but fundamentally, two things are critical, and unfortunately, they're not the easy answers. Number one, you really need to be very easy to do business with.
Yeah.
Very easy, and you have to access information. The partners need to access information very quickly. It needs to be very accurate. It needs to be self-explanatory. You have to be truly digitized. Those are the table stakes. The more challenging part is you do need to create a person-to-person relationship with these partners. There's really no other way to do it. It's very challenging unless you have such a competitive advantage in the marketplace that your solution alone is driving that.
How many of those are there really?
They're not. I mean, we've seen them for sure, but Uber comes to mind, and
they don't last long.
And some of them don't. But for you to have that kind of channel where or you work for a company that has that challenge, that's the way I've seen it successful. We've not been in that position as an organization for sure, but there are a lot of companies that have really started on the ground floor in the Canadian marketplace with not a very well-known brand that have done very well over time, and and that's how they focus. They know their solution. There is a true differentiator in the market. They develop deep strategic relationships with fewer partners. And it's amazing what happens. You get those partners that lose a deal because they didn't work with your solution. And it's amazing how much they want to be part of the solution the next time around. So you've got to win in the marketplace. And you can only do it, in my opinion, that way.
It's funny. It's I'm in total agreement. Number one is, yes, you absolutely have to be easy to work with. Selling is hard. People don't want to have to work to partner. The challenge associated, everybody wants to get as many partners as they can, but get good partners. Get partners where you can develop a really strong relationship, and then make them the envy of other partners that recognize a differentiator. Absolutely. We've run into prospects that, have a lot of, products that have a lot of competition that's out there that there's really not much difference in the product themselves. And they're trying to build a channel. Well, you need to figure out a differentiator. What is it? Is it you? Is it the product? Is it the service? What is it? But you need to differentiate yourself. You just can't be me too and expect the channel to buy in. In my experience, the channels often said, well, okay, if you're going to replace that product over there, well, I already get this revenue from that product. What are you going to bring to the table in additional revenue over and above that product? You can't expect to replace another product. You have to be able to add revenue to the channel, to the individual partners. That's where they have to feel it. Otherwise, why would they make that kind of commitment?
Yeah, I agreed fully. And I think the other thing is that, when you start to build a channel, the mindset that a rep needs to have, because, part part of being on the leadership team at HP, I was a rep. I was an end user rep, and I was a channel rep for many years, sales rep. And one of the things I've always held in mind is that any customer or partner I deal with, I make the decision right at the front that they will be a partner or customer for life. For life. And I mean your entire career, provided you stay in the industry, of course. And even if you don't, it doesn't matter. But that's the way you need to approach, I think, the channel. Because when you really think about what is it going to take for this person or this organization to want to deal with me and my company forever, things become very clear. It's got to be easy for them. I've got to add true value. I need to maintain my integrity. I have to be consistent. I have to be fair. I have to acknowledge them as much as I want them to acknowledge me. I mean, when you start off with that in mind, how you build out your channel starts to become more and more clear, because you look for those values also in a channel partner. And if they have those values where they view this as a long-term relationship, or at least demonstrate that they are willing to work with you that way, I think there's a lot of success to be had.
You know, I don't know that you want to give that away. That is perhaps, look, I've been in and out of the channel since the mid 80s, selling direct, selling it through the channel. You know, obviously in the last 3.5 years at ChannelAssist, I've really focused on the channel. And I'll be honest with you, John, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that. And that, for me, that really resonates. And I think the reason it really resonates, especially in the channel, is that I don't think that everybody understands how difficult it is to convince a prospective partner to become a real partner. I've always believed that signing a partner is more difficult than signing a client. And the reason is because more often than not, the client isn't completely dependent on your product for their business to survive. But the partner very often is dependent on you and your product for their business to survive. And so I could see the connection between partner for life, treat them like they're going to be around forever, and do the things that are necessary to make that happen. Because they made a commitment to you, their business made a commitment to you, and quite frankly, the existence of their business is dependent on you, and vice versa, exactly. Of course. That's really interesting. So that brings me to the fact that, well, if I look at Ingram Micro as an example, and pardon me, everybody on the call, for talking a little more technology space, but Ingram Micro can be anybody. Ingram Micro is a company that has 3,000 partners. They sell the product for 3,000 vendors. I counted them, not one by one, but page by page. That's how many there were. And if you assume that every vendor has 10 products that Ingram Micro sells. Now, I'm sure those of you on the call have those kinds of partners. It could be AT&T. It could be a Verizon. It could be General Electric. It could be any number of partners that resell thousands of products. And so when I look at competition, for HP, I don't look at Lenovo as competition, even though they are your prime or one of your prime principal competitors, or Dell or anybody else like that. I look at where can the channel sales rep spend their time. They can spend their time selling PCs or printers or networking or services. They have a choice. Those 30,000 products, they can focus on any number of those products, educate themselves, learn, and position. Now, every once in a while, sure, a customer is going to call up and say, listen, I've done my homework. I want to buy HP printer or HP printers, and I want to network them. Awesome. That makes it easy for the sales rep. But when they spend their own time, when they cold call, when they actively pursue opportunities, what are they looking to sell? How do you as an organization, and how do you, John, make sure it's your product they're positioning rather than, a widget or something else that competes for your time because they in fact are a competitor?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you need to acknowledge, specifically in this particular situation, is the role that they play and when they play it. So a company like an Ingram is a traditional distributor where they inventory product and they sell it to our dealers. We sell to Ingram. Ingram sells to our dealers. That's the core business. They do a lot of other things. They do, third-party warehousing. They do reverse logistics. They do services, whatever, asset tagging, all image loading, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things that they data center, et cetera. There's a lot of things that they do. And so you've got to know what they can do for you and where. So, for example, if we're talking about, if we segment the partner community to, kind of large players like our dealers, we have dealers that do anywhere from $5,000 a year to $120 million a year. That's how big that spectrum is, how wide it is. If we remove the ones that are high volume, meaning if they're high volume, they're typically selling to larger accounts, notwithstanding a couple of exceptions. Knowing that partner, that, let's say that dealer selling to the Royal Bank or selling to CIBC, they're never going to be influenced by Ingram Micro, right? They're never going to say, hey, maybe you should sell RBC this printer instead of that printer. It's just not going to happen. They have standards, so on and so forth. If you go to the longer tail, the partners that we don't touch very often, the partners that deal with SMB, particularly those in the small segment, this is where there can be influence by both the channel partner, the dealer who sells to that end customer, SMB customer, ultimate consumer, or the distribution rep. And that's where we can influence. And we do things. We incent the distributors to do certain things for us, as do our competitors. We will put headcount there that's dedicated to HP to make sure that our message is driven day in and day out to all the relevant people in that space that sells to SMB. We provide financial incentives to the individual rep when possible. Can't happen all the time. There's lots of rules around that, but there are certain, I don't have to tell you, Richard, what kind of incentives we provide at your Micro. You're very well aware of them. Right. Thank you for that. You do a great job, by the way. Your team does a great job. And so, you got to know where they can influence and where they cannot. And so we do provide this differentiation in the market. Now, the challenge is that so do our competitors. And we just got to do it better than them. Sometimes it comes down to you got to be better than they are at what you both do. And I think that's where we're able to see success with certain distributors and certain partners, and our competitors see that as well for themselves.
So the one thing that is absent from what you just said, and I just want to point this out to everybody on the call, you didn't mention product once. All right. So the reliance on product can't be the reason that you win, because from one day to the next, you could have the best product, and then all of a sudden someone can have a better product. If you rely on that, the world changes too quickly for that. It sounds to me, John, that your dependence on relationship and offering value through relationship seems to be the core at what you're at and what your overall strategy is at for your team. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. I think the financial element of the conversation is also very important, because when you look at certain partner types in whether they're distributors or resellers or online, etc., basis points of margin make a massive difference to their bottom line. I'm talking 20 basis points on a deal, for example, is very significant. And it's also important. Yes, relationship is critical. There's no doubt about it. But you really do need to understand what drives a distributor. for example, that's just a distributor, because
Right.
we're using, I'll use that as an example. It is about turning the inventory. It is about, financial incentives like terms that make a difference. It's promotional dollars to help them sell what we have. I mean, there are a lot of things that go in there that are very much related to financial incentives.
Right.
So yeah, the relationship is absolutely critical. There's no doubt about that. But if you're not understanding your partner's profit, where it comes from and what affects it, and what it means to them, then you can have a great relationship, but you're missing the point. You're going to miss where you need to sell and how you need to sell.
Yeah, I guess I'm making the assumption that a great relationship it comes from the understanding of what their challenges are, right? And financial is absolutely one of those challenges.
Yeah. It's not that obvious to everybody, but you're right. I agree.
So when you talk about distribution, obviously, the number of points they get can have a dramatic influence on their overall profitability. When you're talking about smaller partners that are more geographically focused or more industry focused, it's a little different, right? Because their value proposition is different and it's not entirely based on price. Price is obviously important, but it becomes more important. Their overall solution becomes more about value, right? And that they bundle products together. They don't just sell PCs. They don't just sell printers. They don't just sell networks. They sell solutions to their customers, and they can be focused based on, on their needs and requirements, their industry, et cetera. With 1,600 of those types of partners, not all the same, of course, it's got to be pretty tough to have that kind of coverage where you develop those relationships and don't just turn it into purely transactional, right? I mean, there's a balancing act between transaction and relationship. 1,600 partners is a lot. How do you make sure that they're all engaged? How do you do that?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's a big challenge, Richard. I mean, some of the smaller partners really don't need a lot from you.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to, there's a certain level of engagement you need to have, but it doesn't have to go beyond there because they move too quickly. Small companies don't have time to develop this deep, long-term relationship with some of their, business partners. They just can't do it. They don't have the time. My daughter owns a hair salon. She doesn't have time to do that. I see what she does. She works every night. She gets home. She works 3 hours every single night doing all her books and so on and so. They don't have time for any of that stuff. So some of them really just need a little bit of help. And so, I think so. What we do to leverage that's where we look at distribution as a great opportunity, because each of our distributors have associations. So, all of them have a subset of partners, and usually small partners, that they all get together 2 or 3 times a year, and we're able to communicate en masse. It's not hand-to-hand combat. At that point, we're just hitting key messages. And don't underestimate the consistency of the message, because and the consistency of how important it is for organizations to have consistent behavior, so that when you see them twice a year, you're still going down that path. Your message, you haven't done anything to discredit what you had said previously. You've maintained the integrity. It's not intimate, but whatever it is, you've maintained that integrity with that partner. So it's challenging. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we got to the point, Richard, where we used to have sales representatives that were fully dedicated to the dealer community, the VARs, mm-hmm. and then we had another set of sales representatives who were completely dedicated to end users. Well, as pressure started to come, competitive pressures and managing your profitability as a country, put a squeeze in all that. So we combined the role. We then went to somebody who managed partners, but their other job was managing end user customers, two very different roles that we had to merge. So I think, there's so many things changing in the marketplace that, we leverage our distributors to get us in front of those partners. We keep the messages high level. We are to the point. We get in, we get out, we're consistent, we care, and then again, your behavior just in the field just needs to be very consistent. That's kind of how we manage it.
Right. I remember when Apple came out with the Square, and banks were up in arms, and because they felt that they were going to be taken out of, they were going to actually lose control of the customer. There was one organization that was now between them and their customer. It didn't turn out that way, and the banks pivoted and made it work. But for a second, they were a little frantic for fear that all of a sudden there was a way cheaper, less expensive, easier solution to use. It didn't turn out that way, but the point is that whenever you put someone between you and your customer, there's risk. And it seems to me that HP is all in on that risk. How does an organization like yours forecast? I mean, you're one major, and in some cases, a couple of steps away from that client. Are you dependent on the channel to effectively communicate with you? Do they provide a level of reporting that gives you comfort that you're on top of what's going on from a numerical or data standpoint?
So the way the math works for us, it's pretty straightforward. Because we're such a large channel and with a very diverse and dispersed dealer channel, you can really apply the law of large numbers, right? That in the SMB segment, so partners that sell to the SMB customer, you have a lot of history there. And things don't change overnight. So there's an element where pure mathematics comes into play. And so the way we forecast is we make an assumption on market share position. We assume that we're going to keep at bare minimum the market share that we had last year in that quarter. And that really shaves off a certain percentage of the overall forecasting because we do so much business in the SMB space as well as the enterprise. On the enterprise space, it's hand-to-hand combat, right? Yeah. It's being in that customer, knowing what's going on, understanding understanding we want an RFP, when is it going to roll out, how many units. It's just pure dynamic, Microsoft Dynamics. It is absolutely pure. Every deal we count, every single unit that kind of is shipping and so on and so forth. But it's amazing having, if you actually look at the data and you go through those two processes where you use the law of large numbers for the SMB market, and then you get specific on the large accounts to come up with a proper forecast, you can actually skip all of that and just go to the law of large numbers, right. Unless there's an anomaly somewhere, because you win some, you lose some. And so it's amazing how after 2 weeks of a quarter, you can predict within 3% accuracy what your number is actually going to be.
Being a large company.
Well, yeah, but it comes with other things too, right?
Oh yeah, we're living and dying week to week.
Yeah. Now, Richard, we do hold. There is a lot of rigor. Like even though you can do that forecasting process and do all kinds of funky things with it, we are rigorous around the pipeline. You have to be. There is no choice in that. We got to know where a business is coming from. We need to understand what we need to, be ready, because supply chain in our world plays a big factor in here, right? So absolutely. You may get the order. If you're not forecasting it, you're not shipping, you're not getting revenue. So, we have that whole supply chain thing going on, which I'll tell you is a very complicated process, particularly now. But there is rigor. There is rigor around that.
Right. Okay. John, this has been great. I see we have a number of questions. Brooke, am I reading the questions or are you reading the questions?
I can read them if you'd like, Richard. So here's the first question. First one is, what should be best practices in terms of sales commissions to mitigate conflict between direct and channel sales?
What do you think?
I have an answer. It's both a good answer and a bad answer because my answer is an expensive answer. The answer to that question is you pay both.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Otherwise, you are asking for big problems. You will never have a sales organization that's aligned. It disrupts a customer. It disrupts a partner. It disrupts the organization internally. You need to have it.
I like to look at it as seeding the channel. Especially if you're a small company and you're looking to develop your channel. You need to show the channel the process. They need to know how to handle objections. You want the direct sales force to partner with the partner. And I mean, go on calls with the partner reps so that they can see what good looks like. So they can understand how to handle the objections that are inevitable. And you want the direct sales force to feel the rewards of developing the channel and the strength in the channel by rewarding them. A bad comp plan, well, it leads to bad performance as a general rule, and you need to train that behavior. And since most reps are coin operated, you need to treat them and compensate them in a manner that you want the organization to grow. So what's your strategy? Is your strategy to grow the channel, or is your channel strategy not to? If you want to grow it, you better have everybody pulling in the same direction to do it. That includes a direct sales force.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here's the second question. In my space, we make it very easy to be a reseller, so much so that there is very little contractually to fall back on to ensure some level of performance. How would you suggest we motivate to build and maintain a level of interest and activity in selling our product?
So I think that you go in, depending on the type of organization you have, you go kind of one of two ways, really. I think, if I just think about it quickly, number one is if you have incredible brand preference, you put those financial metrics right into the plan, right into the contract. In order for you to be a partner, you got to do this much business with us. If you have strong pull from the market, if you're developing a market, you have less leverage than that. And there's really not much you can really do. We're in the same situation. We have partners that sell, like I said earlier, $5,000 a year product. We have others that sell $120 million worth of product. None of it is based on a contractual agreement. What motivates those partners to sell that much or that little? Obviously, the market that they're in plays a huge role in it. Some of them play in large markets, some of them play in small. So that's the way it's going to go. However, what we try to do is we incent partners. We create a partner program, which we just launched, by the way, called Amplify, which has multiple things at play. One of them is partner, multiple things actually, but including partner competency, collaboration, so on and so forth. But it also has financial metrics, and if you achieve those financial metrics along with the other and are compliant with the other parts of the program, you're paid money. You're paid money for it. You're paid a rebate for it. And that's kind of how we motivate our partners to hit certain clip levels. So I think, I'm not sure if that answered your question. I'm not sure, Richard, if you interpreted the question any differently or if I missed the mark on it.
No, I think you hit the mark. Look, it depends on how, you're right, it depends on the brand. If you have brand awareness versus not brand awareness. But there has to be some form of demand created. You can't hold people to sell a specific amount of product. All you can do is reward them for selling the product you need. It's in my mind, it's that simple. It's if you want one individual to do something, you have to offer rewards for it. You can't legislate that they do it, because sooner or later they see a brighter side. They see other opportunities that may be of more interest, or they see something where the grass is always greener, and they don't find out it's not till they get there. But that's what happens when you rule with a stick. When you rule more with rewards, be it the individual or the company, you're going to get them working more with you. Yeah. But you also have to help them create demand. And whether it's
correct,
you create the demand, or whether you help show them where that demand is, going back to the last question around direct sales force and indirect sales force, people and companies are going to go where there's opportunity. And if you don't show them where that opportunity is and you don't help them create that opportunity, they're going away whether you have a commitment to sell a certain number or not. So going back to what John said earlier, a partner for life, in my mind, the partner for life is one where you work together to create demand. And that's where you look at things like MDF funds or co-op funds. The program that HP just rolled out, Amplify, is all based on the more you do with us, the more benefits you get. And it just continually feeds on itself. Not everybody can afford to roll out that comprehensive of a program, but there's a lot of simple ways to come out with initiatives that show that they're being rewarded, they're loved, and that you have a partnership for life.
That's great. And by the way, instant feedback, the questioner just said you answered the question very well. So thank you. So they appreciate the answer. Here's the next question. The next question is just to elaborate on pipeline rigor. Could you elaborate on that? Pipeline rigor.
Sure. So we use Microsoft Dynamics as our tool. We have 2 checkpoint meetings weekly. Commits are commits. Our pipeline information, the tool that we use, don't be surprised if you get an email at HP from an executive of the company. So not our CEO, but people that report into the CEO. Saying, I noticed that I was looking at your pipeline. I noticed this. It hasn't moved. What's going on? It's delayed. Let me tell you, the one thing you don't want to be behind on at HP is managing your pipeline. So it's rigorous. We have very clear metrics. You know, if your quota is X, we expect your pipeline to look like this. You know, in other words, you know, in each segment of the pipeline, if you will, in each of the segments, what gross value should be in there to allow you to hit that forecast that you're calling. It's monitored all the time. I personally go through that. It's in our culture. It never used to be, but it has been over the last 6 or 7 years now, at least, where we're really getting crazy about it. So that's what we do. We go through every single opportunity. We ask all the right questions. We're getting better and better at it. It's not perfect, but a lot of our reps don't like it, but that's too bad.
Okay, great. This next one is a 2-parter. It's the same person asking 2 questions, but they're similar. So the first part, how do you demonstrate to partners that you are easy to do business with? And then the sort of next question to that is, what are the biggest mistakes that vendors make when building growth relationships with partners? So maybe to answer the first one first.
So could you repeat the first question?
Sure. So the question is in regards to how do you demonstrate to partners that you're easy to do business with?
Oh, yeah. Well, so, you know, I'm kind of I may be in a different environment than you're in, but there's a few mandatories here. If you're in a business where there's physical product, you have to have very good plumbing, because the last thing anybody ever wants to do is, where's my product? You said I was going to come in here. Why isn't it here? I called that person. I never got an email. There's been no response. Your ETA date is inaccurate. What the heck's going on? I heard it's stuck at customs. I mean, this crap needs to go away. And I call that the plumbing, because plumbing is a very underappreciated thing. You don't have plumbing, you don't have much. And so that's number one. In other words, all operational sides of the business, whether you're selling hardware or software or a service of some sort, needs to be extremely clear. Clear, easy, doesn't provide problems for partners, and so on and so forth. Pricing mechanisms. If you're in the business where you're discounting, that process needs to be clear, quick, well-defined. What criteria do you need to get a special price? How quickly are we going to turn that around? Are you going to be the only partner we give that special price to? I mean, all of these things that kind of encircle an opportunity, or even not a specific opportunity, but in general business, need to be very clean. They can't be things. Think about a salesperson wasting time on, and how frustrated they become when she or he may it comes to the point where they will just stop it. They just won't deal with it anymore. And I think that's a very underestimated situation. Same thing with programs. If you come up with a program, don't, like an incentive program, don't make it complicated. I mean, the one that we have with ChannelAssist, which is called Blue Carpet, is the easiest program in the market, most recognized in the market, most valued in the market. I talked about how easy it is, beyond easy. But that's because ChannelAssist makes it easy. If it were us, we'd probably make it complicated somehow. So, we live by that, and it's not an easy thing to do. Think about COVID right now and supply chain. Supply chain is critical in our business. It's a problem right now, and we, for the first time, we have a reason for it. But those are the kinds of things that I think, make things easier to deal with, and not so much, and people will shy away from the difficult vendors.
That's great, thank you. And then just another question just came in regards to pipeline. Is your pipeline fed to you directly from your channel partners, or is it managed by the internal team that manages the channel partners? And then the third part, if lateral, how do your reps ensure that the partners are providing updating pipeline information?
Yeah. So the first thing is that, so again, if I'm going to separate the two things again, if we sell, okay, let's just make the numbers very straightforward. If we sell $100 million of product, we know that 80% of that is very predictable. So we would take last year's quarter, for example, look at that and say, this number is a predictable number. We may be off a bit, but not really that much. We never really are. The remaining amount is where the rigor is. And that amount that's rigorous comes directly from our own sales force and is determined by their engagement with the end customer. So we do not go to our large partners that sell into banks saying, how much are you going to ship this quarter? We have that conversation, but that's not how we base. And it's used in the evaluation of the pipeline, for sure it is, because they would know the deployment, deployment schedule sometimes better than us. But we depend on our own reps to go directly to that customer, or work with the channel partner together with the customer to determine what that rollout schedule is. And they are the ones that enter it into our tool. So that's how we manage the pipeline. And now, the bigger that number is, if that number is $1 million or $100 million or $1 billion or $2 or $3 billion, that's where the law of large numbers comes in more. Is the bigger the number, the more accuracy you're going to have on what you would then consider to be run rate business.
Okay, that's great. Now, if it's okay with the two of you and everyone who's on the call, we do have a few more questions. I know we're coming up to the 2 o'clock hour, so as long as everyone is okay to stay a few extra minutes, then we can continue with the questions. So here's the next question. What kinds of marketing support or resources do you offer to help your resellers?
Just give me a second because I'm just checking my calendar.
Sure.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry.
I could say it again. Sure. What kinds of marketing support or resources do you offer to help your resellers?
Lots of things. White paper studies, customer testimonials, and by the way, studies not only on implementation or how technology is leveraged and so on and so forth, but market dynamics, right? Like I talked about earlier, we let them know what the key trends are in the market. It wasn't a coincidence that I talked about security, although I just touched on security. But when we did our data, as we continue to do our research, everybody knows how important data is. So we built, and how important security is. Pardon me. And so we built an entire portfolio of technology that is centered around security. And we built the most secure products, as much as an endpoint product can be secure, including things like, protection against your BIOS being hacked, for example. Or we have something called, we have visual hacking, meaning you're on a plane or you're at a Starbucks or wherever you are, and you don't want people to look at your screen. Because I don't know about you, but I always look at what's on somebody else's screen when I'm on an airplane. It's the nature of the beast. I feel terrible about it, but that's what I do. So, we've incorporated that right in the technology. Hit the F2 button, and those security things you used to put, the security screen you used to put on the front of your notebook, it's actually built right into the unit. So, when we went to market and say, here's what we have with all those things, here's the new technology we have, it's all based on market relevance. It's all based on, what we deem to be critical based on customer feedback and what's top of mind for customers. So that's kind of what we provide them with those types of things, and then we provide them with selling collateral, actual selling collateral through email. The challenge we have is that these partners, the partners that I'm dealing with, even the ones that do over $100 million a year with HP, they sell competing products. And so as we're bombarding them with a whole bunch of stuff, our competitors are bombarding them with a whole bunch of stuff. And guess what they have? An inbox that they typically ignore. So that's what our challenge is. Our challenge isn't really about the collateral we give them or the market insights we give them. It's getting them to read ours over our competitors. And we have, different ways of doing that.
One of the things, John, that I've talked to people about is just, if you were starting a channel, to start looking at the idea of some form of co-op fund or MDF fund to get their attention and help market with them, to brand with them, because a lot of partners have unique marketplaces, and that makes them feel like they're marketing towards their market. That often goes a long way with getting the attention of partner executives to say, okay, they're committed to helping us grow the market. That's certainly part of the marketing spend that I know that HP does a good job on. And if you're starting out as a small company, that's something you want to consider, because often your partner has a better understanding for their prospects than you do. So by designing a marketing strategy in coordination and helping them fund that, will go a long way towards creating that demand we spoke of earlier.
That's great. And that's actually perfect timing, because unless there's any other questions, I think that's it. So Richard, just back to you to wrap up.
So look, John, I'd like to thank you a lot. I think there's a number of things that I learned through this. The partner for life is going to stick to me, and I think hopefully you can copyright that. I like to steal things from people, and that's definitely something I'm stealing. Easy to work with. I don't know that you can ever state that and overstate that. To me, a faucet is the thing I think of when easy to work with. You turn it on and it shows up. No complications, no frustration, no excuses. That's what you should aspire to be for your partners. person-to-person deep relationships, especially if you're dealing with a small network. Establish that relationship, and that's pretty consistent with the partner for life. John, I'd like to thank you for your time and appreciate your insights. I hope, and I'm sure that everybody got a lot of value out of it based on the questions. I'm sure they did. So thank you very much. Join us next month when we interview the administrator for Blue Carpet for HP, and she'll be talking about the value proposition associated with incenting channel salespeople directly, and the mechanics around how she works with ChannelAssist to orchestrate really the gold standard of incentive programs in the marketplace. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.